We're just days away from watching Joe Biden and Donald Trump, two men whose combined age is 159, debate in front of a television audience of millions and a live studio audience of not one single person. Tonight, a close look at what we should expect when these two superannuated rivals take the stage. Next.
This is Washington Week with The Atlantic. Corporate funding provided by Consumer Cellular. Additional funding is provided by Ku and Patricia Ewan through the Ewan Foundation, committed to bridging cultural differences in our communities. Sandra and Karl DeLay Magnuson, Rose Herschel and Andy Shreves, Robert and Susan Rosenbaum, the Corporation for Public Broadcasting, and by contributions to your PBS station from viewers like you. Thank you. Once again from Washington, Editor-in-Chief of The Atlantic and moderator, Jeffrey Goldberg.
Good evening and welcome to Washington Week and to our new studio here at WETA. If you notice the table, I built it myself. This coming Thursday, President Joe Biden and the man he defeated in 2020, former President Donald Trump, will make their respective cases to the American people. Neither would want to hear this, but they actually have much in common. Both are unpopular, they are more or less tied in recent polls, and both are older than our previous oldest president, Ronald Reagan. Only one is a convicted felon, however, and yet the pressure is somehow on Joe Biden to prove that he has what it takes to continue in office. Donald Trump will obviously try to highlight what he and his supporters see as Biden's frailty. Biden will undoubtedly highlight the fact that Trump led an anti-constitutional insurrection. Joining me tonight to discuss this and more, Ann Applebaum is my colleague and a staff writer at The Atlantic and author of the forthcoming book, Autocracy, Inc., The Dictators Who Want to Run the World. Zolan Kanno-Youngs is a White House correspondent for the New York Times. Jonathan Karl is the chief Washington correspondent, for ABC News and the author of Tired of Winning, Donald Trump and the End of the Grand Old Party. And Vivian Salama is a national politics reporter at the Wall Street Journal. John, I didn't mean to demote you.
Oh, no,
I'm sorry. Or promote you. I don't know. Promote, demote, I don't know.
I thought it was still a good title.
Yeah, no, everybody here hears great titles. So welcome to our new table. Very proud of it. I want to focus our attention really on the debate tonight. It's something that I didn't think was going to happen. I'm still not 100% sure it's going to happen. We'll get to that. But I've been thinking a lot about the particular weaknesses that both men bring to Atlanta next week. Actually, watch this short clip, and you'll see what I'm referring to.
One more time, come on. I don't wanna love nobody but you. I don't wanna love nobody but you.
And it must be because of MIT, my relationship to MIT. Very smart. He goes, I say, what would happen if the boat sank from its weight and you're in the boat and you have this tremendously powerful battery and the battery's now underwater? So I said, so there's a shark 10 yards away from the boat, 10 yards, or here. Do I get electrocuted? If the boat is sinking, water goes over the battery, the boat is sinking. Do I stay on top of the boat and get electrocuted? Or do I jump over by the shark and not get electrocuted? Because I will tell you, he didn't know the answer. He said, you know, nobody's ever asked me that question.
So one man in that little sequence has some frailty issues. It just seems that way. I know his people are telling us, the journalists in Washington, that Joe Biden is like the Hulk. He's all like muscle and vigor, but our eyes are telling us something else. The other man is only 3 years younger, actually, and he doesn't seem very frail physically, but you know, in matters of cognition and coherence and storytelling, you know, it's something else entirely. So, I mean, I don't want to overstate it, but often Donald Trump doesn't make any sense, right? So, John, how does Trump come into this debate and prove that he's cognitively competent?
Well, you did something important there, which is you played an extended clip of Donald Trump. And by the way, you could have kept on going, I think it's something that people haven't seen much of. Donald Trump is omnipresent in our lives, the criminal cases, all this, but there has been not much coverage of what he is actually saying since he was in the White House. I mean, people have largely tuned out. So here you will have, an extended period of time where we actually hear Donald Trump have to respond to real basic questions, give answers, have to have rebuttals, and to hear what he's actually talking about. And he's been out there. I mean,
Right.
this is actually the case I've been making based on my reporting. This is not even the same Donald Trump of the Trump presidency. He wanders all over the place. His ideas have gotten fuzzy.
I mean, he's never been linear.
No, he's never in particular. But I think this is the first extended look that a mass group of American people will have of Donald Trump since he was in the White House.
And that was the thinking, too, when sort of the Biden campaign, when President Biden first sort of challenged him this early. I, like you, was surprised when the news of this popped this early in what is normally the debate schedule, that it's happening this early. Yeah. But when you talk to Democrats and Biden's top aides, they think that by being able to put Trump out there in the spotlight can sort of help them accomplish what they've been trying to do for now the past couple of years and have thus far failed to really convey to voters. And that's the contrast.
Right. Vivian, I want to ask you two questions. The first is, would you rather be electrocuted or eaten by a shark? You don't have to answer that one right now. The second question is, how does Joe Biden come into this debate and prove that he's not too old for the job?
Well, first of all, to your first question, I'm terrified of sharks, so definitely electrocuted. That's just me.
Something you have in common with Donald Trump, then.
There you go.
Okay.
As far as President Biden, typically when you go into a debate like this, it's a referendum. When there's an incumbent, it's a referendum on their presidency. Of course, now we have a very unusual situation where both men have served as president, and so both of them have a record. That's one of the big differences between Donald Trump of today versus Donald Trump back in 2016, where he didn't have that. But then you have two presidents who are older, and Donald Trump has really fixated on this idea of Joe Biden's age. They've been playing those clips over and over again on, everything from Fox News to any other Republican or conservative networks to show that he is either too frail or kind of wandering off. Trump talks at his rallies about Biden's cognitive abilities. Ironically, at one of his rallies a few days ago, he talked about Biden's cognitive abilities, and then he messed up the name of the former White House doctor / Congressman Ronnie Jackson. He called him Ronnie Johnson immediately after talking about Biden's cognitive abilities. So obviously the two men come in here with, challenges. They are both older at this point. Trump himself, not the man he was in 2016. You just played a clip of him kind of rambling a little bit, and that's one of his issues as well. And so one of them is going to have issues of coming out there and appearing strong, and the other one is going to have kind of that be on the offense to corner him on everything from his age and his frailty to his record on the economy and other things as well. And it's going to be a challenge for President Biden.
And who, just your opinion on this, but who's in greater danger in this debate in the sense of, oh, my goodness, I didn't realize he was like that?
I mean, they both face a certain kind of danger. I think, in a way, Joe Biden has the advantage, partly because that clip that you just showed, plus the other clips that have been circulating, there's one of him appearing to wander off at a G7 meeting when, in fact, he was going to greet somebody. That was edited. That was edited to make it look like that. But that means the bar for him is very low. All he has to do is prove that he's not senile, and clearly he isn't senile. And so he has a chance of doing very well, whereas I think actually the expectations for Trump are higher. And so it will be harder for Trump to appear coherent, to sound coherent. Trump doesn't seem to me anymore capable of making a coherent argument or making a case. And in a way, the difficulty is also going to be for those who are running the debate, because Trump is going to lie. That's what he does now. He just goes off on these rants. He makes stuff up.
I want to get to that. I want to get how do you actually manage this debate in a second. But I just want to come to this question I sort of foreshadowed a bit at the beginning. Do you think that the debate is going to happen?
At this point, just based off of my reporting and what I'm hearing, yeah.
Trump's fully in. He's not going to look for a exit.
Trump is fully in.
Yeah, and look,
Biden's fully in.
And Biden's fully in. He's going to Camp David. He's at Camp David right now. Ron Klain will be helping out with moderating as well. They are going through mock debates. I'm of the position the reporting basically says thus far that
I agree with Ann that the expectations game is favoring Biden, but I think this is a potentially perilous moment for Joe Biden. I mean, his people will have you believe that the problem that he faces is basically the media hasn't been covering how great and strong he is, and there's been and that his enemies have taken clips out of context. But in reality, I mean, the people, Democrats who are not inside the Biden campaign but very much want him to win, are deeply concerned about his ability to make it through this campaign, and are worried about at least the perception of him being so old and not able to make it through 4 years of a second term.
Yeah, stay on that for a little bit. How much of that anxiety is related to the fact that at the end of his prospective theoretical second term, he'd be 86 years old? How much of the worry is like, even if he can get through next year, is Kamala Harris going to be president? Are you voting essentially for Kamala Harris?
I think that is the concern. And I went back and I know you've done this too, but I went back and rewatched the debates from 4 years ago, particularly the second debate, which was the first debate was a bunch of shouting and they both looked awful. Mm-hmm. Trump looked a little worse than Biden. But Biden was sharp in that second debate. And when you look at it, you're struck at how much younger he looks. It was 4 years ago. It looks like more than 4 years ago. And I think one of the significance, the significance of this debate coming so early is it is coming before the Democratic convention, and that dream that fevered dream of Republicans and some Democrats that there will be some change at the Democratic convention will not be over until Biden speaks and accepts the nomination.
But there's also so much riding on this debate because of that. You have the conventions coming right afterwards, and then we don't have another debate until September. So they are going to be there. It's the first time that these two see each other since the last time they debated. And for them at this point to be able to come out there and actually have an exchange, a policy discussion, that's why so many rules have been put into place. Everything from cutting the mics while they're speaking to having them on opposite ends of the stage, so that you don't have an incident like that first debate where they're just shouting over each other. I'm sure there's still going to be opportunities for them to do that. But also remember that both of these men, when they are not scripted, they tend to say things that can be a little bit off the cuff and or not what their aides would like. President Biden has been doing these mock debates, trying to really kind of soak in all the talking points where they're trying to get him to really memorize and stick to certain policy framings. But former President Trump is not. They say he's having policy discussions. So whether or not they're really getting into the nitty-gritty of specific policy talking points, or if he's just going to go out there and riff, that could really make a difference for him.
Well, John, you've written a whole book on this. The idea that Donald Trump is going to read the briefing book is not historically grounded.
No. And policy is not Trump's thing, as you know.
Right.
But if I can just say, so I think just to finish the Biden point is this is the moment where he can either answer those concerns, particularly the concerns among Democrats, that he can do this. Look, here he is, big moment. He seizes it. He looks like he can handle it. He can take on Donald Trump. Or if it's a disaster, there will be questions about whether or not he should continue to be the nominee.
Right, Ann?
No, I was just going to say that one of the things that's at stake in this election is, do we vote on policy? Do we vote on what's really happening in the economy? Or do we vote on bombast and identity politics and, essentially lies and that suit whatever biases you have? And the debate might show that. I mean, we might have a contest between one person who's trying to talk about policy on the one hand, and another person who's riffing about sharks on the other. But there's a constituency that likes the sharks. I mean, he's funny, he's a showman. I can identify with someone who says wacky stuff. That's just like me. It's just like my uncle. And that's one of the things that we'll discover.
Right. Zolan, let me ask you about. I mean, John alluded to this. You've been watching every Biden debate going back 30?
A lot of footage. Nearly
lot
40,
of footage.
37 years.
And
of
thank
presidential
God,
debates.
somebody's there to do it. We appreciate your efforts. What's changed over the years in the way Biden does this?
Well, again, just to emphasize this to folks, he's been engaged in presidential debates for some 37 years. We're going back to 1987 for the first time for Joe Biden. That's nearly 4 decades ago. Of course things have changed. He is now 81 years old. So looking at the performance of somebody in 1987, how much can that really inform the approach going forward? But we can find indicators of some things that have changed in his overall approach or the various styles of Joe Biden. He can be combative. And honestly, when he was combative in 2007 or against Paul Ryan later in 2012 re-election campaign, that was when Democrats actually were pretty high on him. I talked to David Axelrod recently, who was saying that Joe Biden's moment where he, during a primary, where he went at Rudy Giuliani, saying he basically knows 3 words, one of them is 9/11, paraphrasing there, or when he was facing questions on his discipline, and he gave Brian Williams a 1-word answer when he asked about, are you going to be giving gaffes? Yes. That caught the attention of future President Obama at that point, and of Democrats. When he was more folksy, almost avuncular against Paul Ryan and sort of laughed at him, called him my friend, mocked him in the debate. That also people thought...
Malarkey.
Malarkey, of course. People also thought that was him at a strong point. But then we get to closer to the present. Yeah. And 2020 presidential primaries, some Democrats thought that he struggled, particularly even to get a word in, right? And now that was some time ago. That was 4 or 5 years ago, 2019.
Just in terms pure energy, interventionist energy, he wasn't bringing.
Quite literally trying to get his time to speak. At times he put his finger up to try and get a word in. There were other times he cut himself off because his own time. When have you ever heard of a politician in a debate speaking for not too long but cutting themselves off? That's unheard of.
Right.
So all of that to answer your question, there were, as we got to more recent years, some of the combative nature actually went to almost like a rule-following elder statesman. But there were still signs when he went against Trump in the debates.
Definitely.
And the combative nature was no longer just having like a zinger line that was prepared, but actually goading Trump into delivering a comment that would be viral. Think about the Proud Boys comment, as well, daring him to condemn the Proud Boys. And that, I think, is going to be key to watch for this debate. It's not almost what Joe Biden says, but what can Joe Biden goad Trump into saying?
I want to talk about the mechanics of the debate, but I also want you to watch this brief clip from one of those debates where you can see the combative nature of this. Why don't we watch that?
Make sure you, in fact, let people know
He doesn't want
you're
to
a
answer the
senator.
question.
I'm not going to answer the question
Why
because
wouldn't you answer that
because
question?
the question
you want to put a lot of new Supreme Court justice,
the
radical
question-
left.
Will you shut up, man?
Listen, who is on your list, Joe?
I've been thinking a lot sympathetically about Jake Tapper and Dana Bash, 2 excellent colleagues of ours in Washington who have a very, very hard job. John, you've done this stuff for a while. What are the biggest challenges facing the moderators in making this a substantive, illuminating debate?
I'm thinking the guy in the control room that has to deal with the muting of the microphones, because they have all these rules about you have 2 minutes to start, minute rebuttal, and as soon as it's over, the mic is. But they're going to be going back and forth. As a moderator, the challenge here is you're a moderator. You're not an interviewer. It's not like you're coming in and I'm here to grill Joe Biden or Donald Trump on X policy. You're here to moderate, but you don't want to let lies just fly by. But as you do your fact checking, you can't look like you're playing a role in debating the people that are supposed to be debating each other.
Yeah.
And also remember, it's also perilous. You have to, if you're doing fact checking in real time, you better damn well be right. Remember when Candy Crowley fact checked Mitt Romney in a debate in 2012, and actually the fact check wasn't, it was murkier?
Right. But this is an interesting question, Ann, because, you've written a lot about this particular subject. When Donald Trump says he won the 2020 election, how far do the moderators go? How long do they keep pressing back and saying, you actually lost, and before letting it just go to the next set of issues?
They're going to have to do something. They're going to have to say, no, Mr. Trump, you lost, and now the next question is for President Biden. Or alternately, Biden's going to have to do it. And I hope that's one of the things that he's preparing to do. When Trump lies, when he says he won the election, when he says, his economy was perfect, when he says the economy is now terrible, whatever piece of the mythology he chooses, Biden is going to have some prepared way to say you're wrong. And shouting that you're lying might not work. And so he's going to need some way of countering him.
So it seems almost as if the moderators, the two CNN hosts of this, are representing not fact-checking so much as reality intervention. But I mean, it seems like a very, very hard job to do to balance in a polarized society. And I'm wondering what you would say to them about trying to bring in, and I want to talk about policy for a couple of minutes, how do you get them to say something substantive about the economy, immigration, the Middle East, et cetera? What's the magic here?
I mean, direct questions and, just really hold them to account. And they have to hold each other to account, too. And that's one of the things is that the moderators, yes, they're going to have to do it, but Joe Biden and Donald Trump are going to have to also hold each other to account. And that's the point of a debate.
Right.
There's a real opportunity on the policy stuff from a moderator perspective. I mean, Donald Trump, there are some policies that are floating around here. One is mass deportations of tens of millions of people that are in the United States undocumented. How is that going to work?
And make no mistake, some of the announcements that Joe Biden just made recently also factored directly into a strategy of bringing up immigration in this debate. I mean, he just had two separate executive actions. One that I know from talking to people involved with his campaign, basically the line is going to be, hey, look, we help to unite families in the U.S.
It's interesting to stay on the shark theme. It's almost like that's chum in the water right before the debate to sort of talk about allowing more legal immigrants to come in. I mean, it's really
it's a kind of a high wire balancing act. But from the strategy perspective for them, it's say what we did, right? And then immediately flip to what do you plan to do? What do you plan to do? Because remember, it's not just about pulling in sort of a swing voter or a Republican that might be undecided. It's also about energizing your base that might be on the couch come November.
Well, and that's where the challenge is going to be for Donald Trump, because if you watch him in his rallies, a lot of times he will say that, Joe Biden is the worst president ever. When I was president, I did X, Y, Z. Okay, but that's backward looking. You have to say what you're going to do next and really lay out your vision for the country moving forward. And we have not heard that a ton from Donald Trump.
And I want to ask you about another policy issue just as important as immigration or the economy, and that's something that Donald Trump referred to yesterday when he said, for 20 years I heard that if Ukraine goes into NATO, it's a real problem for Russia, and I think that's really why this war started. Basically, Donald Trump is back to the sort of semi-isolationist. We provoked Russia, we the West provoked Russia, and I'm wondering I wanted to get your commentary on that as a Russia expert, but I'm also wondering if you could place this issue and rank it in terms of importance for the voters.
I mean, I doubt that the issue as such has huge importance for the voters, although there are ways in which it could even change the election in the next couple of months. I mean, a surprise either way, a breakthrough on the front line, some unexpected piece of aggression that might suddenly burst into the campaign and change it. And there are a lot of people who are watching Putin for exactly that. It's true that Trump has, I think under the influence of some of his advisors and some of the people around him, he has started to use, once again, this Russian propaganda about how the war was our fault. I think because that gives him a way of contrasting to Biden. It's if I had been in office, it wouldn't have started, and so on. It's somehow the U.S. is at fault rather than Russia.
John, just in the minute that we have left, I'm curious to know. I want to hear you on what you're looking for out of this debate. Something that how will you advance the understanding of these two candidates for the American people?
I think that the biggest thing, the single biggest thing, is how Biden does, and does he rise to the occasion, and does he calm these fears? And like I said, this is not just Republican carping; it's really fears among some of his real allies about his cognitive state. And I think he has the ability.
Cognitive
to
state, or his ability to? Is it a physical issue or is it a cognitive issue?
I mean, it's his ability to be quick and look. We're in a visual. I mean, this debate's on television. How he looks when he takes on Donald Trump is a big part of that. His ability to take this campaign to Donald Trump in what's going to be a vicious fall campaign.
Vivian, very quickly, how worried are the Biden people that this doesn't go well?
They are worried, but they also point to people underestimating him ahead of the State of the Union, and they felt that he did well at State of the Union. They say you all underestimated him, primarily the media. Watch what happened then. That's the Joe Biden that we know, and he can do it again.
No teleprompter this time, though.
But there's no teleprompter.
Yeah, this is a much tougher venue.
But I have a teleprompter. People don't know that at home, but I've made it myself too, and I'm reading it right now when I tell you that we have to leave it there for now. And I want to thank our panelists for joining us and sharing their reporting. I want to thank all of you at home for joining us. And please be sure to read Anne Applebaum's recent cover story on the power of propaganda at theatlantic.com. I'm Jeffrey Goldberg. Good night from Washington.
Corporate funding for Washington Week with The Atlantic is provided by
Consumer Cellular, this is Sam. How may I help you? This is a pocket dial. Well, somebody's pocket. Thought I'd let you know that with Consumer Cellular, you get nationwide coverage with no contract. That's kind of our thing. Have a nice day.
Additional funding is provided by Koo and Patricia Ewan through the Ewan Foundation, committed to bridging cultural differences in our communities. Sandra and Karl DeLay Magnuson, Rose Herschel and Andy Shreves, Robert and Susan Rosenbaum, the Corporation for Public Broadcasting, and by contributions to your PBS station from viewers like you. Thank you.
You're watching PBS.